Might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling them flares. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch a scenario. My stereos, I leave them in variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat, beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio Show. Once again, your host, Nick Bernabe from UCY.tv and the antimedia.org/radio. Super happy to be back. What are we going to talk about tonight? All kinds of stuff in the news. As we covered extensively on Monday, you know, the fallout is still being measured from this ambassador assassination. You know, we're still trying to make sense of what went on there. We've got a couple new updates. The first thing I want to talk about regarding that is an article we published yesterday on the Anti-Media. And, you know, Putin is responding now to this attack, and, you know, it definitely looks like he's going to be taking a very forceful response. In fact, one could argue that it almost seems like it almost seems like he's saying the same type of stuff you would expect to hear out of Washington, D.C. And, you know, this is something that we've kind of overlooked, but, you know, it is becoming increasingly likely that Russia is getting sucked into a protracted, conflict in the Middle East, something that, you know, the United States has had plenty of experience with. Since 9/11, you know, repeatedly, over and over, this same thing happens to us. This time it's looking like, you know, especially with this assassination of the ambassador, it's going to give Putin kind of the excuse to extend his quote-unquote war on terror, which is exactly what he called it. He said, quote, the only response that Moscow should offer is stepping up the fight against terrorism. So, you know, I guess the U.S. isn't the only country with a war on terror. Russia's getting involved too. And this has been kind of, the rhetoric has been pretty in line here. I mean, the entire conflict that Russia's been backing over in Syria has been a quote-unquote war on terror, and they've maintained that the Syrian rebels are terrorists, many of which actually are. I mean, al-Nusra Front and plenty of different Islamist kind of insurgencies going on in Syria. I think that it's at least partially true that Russia is fighting terrorism. Of course, they're also fighting, you know, the genuine rebels, because it's you know, what's going on in Syria started off as a rebellion, and there was an organic movement there. It's been co-opted by a lot of these terror groups, but there's still remnants of that. So, it's just one of these, conflicts that's hard to get back out of once you get started. And, that's kind of what I see going on with Russia right now. And, of course, the U.S. has been backing the other side of it, maybe with the intention of drawing Russia in. Maybe that was the whole point. This is something that the U.S., the very similar tactic that was used against the USSR in Afghanistan. I could definitely see some parallels there with the Mujahideen and Bin Laden and all that stuff that the U.S. did back then. Maybe it's they're pulling the same thing, and maybe the whole point was to pull Russia into the Syrian conflict. But in the end, it looks like Russia has outmaneuvered the United States. By all measure, Aleppo has fallen, and that was basically the last major stronghold for ISIS and the rest of the opposition to the Syrian government inside of Syria. Now, of course, ISIS is still operating Mosul and other places in Iraq, other cities in northern Syria. But Aleppo is no longer a base for the rebels. It's gone, and by that measure, Russia has accomplished a lot of its goals, but we haven't yet seen any. Of course, it's fresh, just happened just over the past couple of weeks, but we haven't seen any pullback yet from Russia. And so, maybe that signals that they're going to be more involved in the Middle East militarily from now on. I'm not sure. Joining us now on the call is my longtime co-host, DB Schwartz. What's up, man?
Hey, not too much, man. Just keeping up with what's going on day by day to see what's going to happen from all these major events happened on Monday, essentially. Monday changed everything. I don't know if you saw it tonight, but they're talking about martial law in Berlin, and wasn't that the whole goal?
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about Berlin because we didn't talk too much about that on Monday because there wasn't much known, but we're starting to get some more details emerging out of that. And, I saw that also the EU was passing some, changing up some of their gun laws as well, which is pretty interesting too. That news just came out today. They say they've been working on it for a year, but it is interesting that it comes just on the heels of this thing that went on in Berlin. The interesting thing, though, is that what happened in Berlin was a guy running people over with a truck. It wasn't someone shooting up the place. So for this news to break about, the gun control stuff going through in Europe, that, it is a little interesting. The repercussions here are pretty obvious in Germany. Angela Merkel, which, for better or for worse, is kind of like the de facto leader of Europe at this point. And she's been under immense scrutiny because she's had pretty much one of the most open refugee policies, right? Where, a bunch of people that are flooding out of Syria and Iraq are winding up in Germany. And so a lot of people, this is stoking up major tensions in Germany. If you think that there's a tension here in the U.S. between the Trump and the Clinton people, I think it's a lot more intense actually over in Germany right now because they've accepted many, many more refugees. And so people are like freaking out about it. And every time a terror attack like this happens, well, then the obvious is what's going to take place. And because of that, the terrorism is working. And that's the whole point here, is that terrorists have reasons why they do things like that. For one, many, many times domestic terrorism is inspired by foreign policies, especially here in the U.S. So, why are people wanting to go blow people up in Western countries? Well, a lot of times it's an act of, they see it as an act of revenge. Now, what the terrorists do, though, and here's the thing that, and this is why the terrorists continuously win, is that they create like a divide in in cultures where the people from those countries originally start to distrust the people who are Muslims, and that is also a contributing factor to radicalization. So you create like a downward spiral here where the people, let's say the German people, start distrusting Muslim immigrants. The Muslim immigrants start to feel more marginalized. They start becoming under the influence of more radicalized people. The cycle starts to get worse, and then there's a homegrown terrorist attack, and then the cycle gets worse, and then it just downward spiral. And so that is really the goal of terrorism, is to create that scenario, because the more you marginalize, the more you can get German people to marginalize Muslims, the more terrorists can recruit. And like that's literally their tactic. And so every time people react in a way, and this goes on constantly around the world, especially here in the United States, whenever there's a terrorist attack carried out by a Muslim, people jump to this huge conclusion where all Muslims are terrorists, or all Muslims have to be second guessed, or we can't trust Muslims on planes, or whatever it is. By reacting in that way, you're actually helping them win. You're helping the terrorists win by reacting like that. If you take a terror attack and say, okay, this one crazy guy, he happened to be Muslim. Let's look at why they're committing acts of terrorism. Like that's the thing that governments never do. Why don't we stop and say, why are these things happening? Why don't we ever ask those questions? I mean, it's that to me is the real thing that really pisses me off, because rather than reacting correctly, and so for instance, let's say the United States was like, you know what? We are having this huge problem with terrorism, and you know what? We need a president that's going to do something about this. If we were in a country where people thought with their rational, logical thinking, they would say, you know what? The guy for the job is someone like Ron Paul, who's going to get us out of all these countries in Syria and Iraq, and he's going to stop drone bombing in Pakistan. He's going to stop trying to topple countries like Libya. Maybe that's the kind of guy we would want to go for, because we understand what is causing terrorism. But instead, it's like, let's vote for a guy like Trump, who's going to make this problem like 10 times worse in about 6 months. Domestically speaking, I can't vouch for Trump's foreign policy because that's still a wild card. But Trump's domestic policies are basically begging for homegrown terrorism. You know, like patrolling Muslim neighborhoods, profiling people, banning people from certain Muslim countries. These ideas are going to marginalize the hell out of Muslims in the United States, and it's going to drive a lot of regular people into the hands of extremists. Trump is going to be the president of homegrown terrorism. I shit you not. I mean, it's so predictable. So the countries, the people react, instead of reacting rationally and saying, okay, this terrorism is doing this because of this, and what he's trying to accomplish is this, and so therefore let's not let them win. Instead, it's like, oh my God, let's blame all Muslims, and you guys are like, people that do that, you're helping them win. You're helping the terrorists win. I'm sorry, but it just really pisses me off, because every time there's some kind of attack and it winds up being a Muslim guy, all over the internet, all over the world, it's people blaming an entire religion for the act of one idiot. You know, and so it's just one of those things that's like perpetually frustrating. Anyway, joining us now on the call is Jake Anderson, I believe. What's up, Jake? You there?
Yeah, man, I'm here. I'm doing well. By the way, when I tried to call in the other night, remember when you said that must be the ghost of Jake trying to call in?
Yeah, what happened?
Well, I was staying at a haunted hotel. Pretty creepy.
Dude,
well, nothing. I'm a demon now, so it's. That was at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. I was on a shoot there because I'm making a documentary based there, and that really freaked me out because I couldn't get patched in, man. I could hear you. It was like being dead and floating around people, and you can hear them and they're talking about you, but you can't be a part of the living world anymore. That's what it felt like.
Damn, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, and because I knew you had no idea that I was at the Cecil, but that's why it freaked me out when you were like, this must be the ghost of Jake calling in. And then, because then I was like, am I ever gonna actually leave this place? I started to feel like, the movie 1408, where John Cusack never gets to leave the hotel. But anyway, this is so far and away from what you were just talking about that I feel bad. Let's talk more about depression in Russia, the new Red Scare. You don't even want to call it the new Red Scare because that's what the mainstream media wants you to call it.
Yeah, dude. It's definitely not it is a new Red Scare, but I think that a lot of people are not. It's not resonating this time around. At least not yet. I just saw some numbers out of, I think it was on Politico who did the first survey, but I read the article on Zero Hedge. Let's see. 71% of Americans don't believe Russia was responsible for election-related hacks. Let me see who did. Yeah, Politico did the survey.
Nick, it's the freakiest result of this pressure by the MSM to keep pushing this is now half of his supporters are saying that they would support him censoring the media.
Oh, wow.
So that's 30 million Americans right now that are saying, well, Trump should be able to say who's on the media now because you guys screwed up and are pushing this BS story so hard.
Oh man, that is where is that from? I want to write about that.
I'll find that for you and send it to you. It was a smaller poll, and the thing that sucks about a lot of these traditional polls is their phone. And who do you reach? Who do you reach at home on a home phone now? It's not a really good representative. But the thing is, it does represent voters because that's the craziest part.
Yeah, a Glover Park poll conducted by Morning Consult found 49% of Trump voters believe the court should make it easier for people to sue the media for unfavorable or false coverage. This was reported by The Hill and Common Dreams and a few other people. We'll probably have a aggregated version of it up tomorrow morning on the anti-media. But yeah, it's pretty insane. So you've got like the left, the corporate Democratic voters that are saying, okay, you know what? We don't want to infringe on free speech legislatively, but let's have Facebook and whoever else we decide censor the news. And then you got on the other end of the spectrum, all these Trump robots or whatever you want to call them. 49% of them are saying, yeah, let's go ahead and allow Trump to tell us, reset the legal standards of the First Amendment and make it easier for people to sue people for whatever unfavorable or false coverage. So yeah, man, I mean, it's full frontal assault on free speech going on right now from both sides of the spectrum, which isn't surprising because normally when the U.S. government does something really horrible, it's a bipartisan thing usually. It's like we mentioned in past shows, it's like they latch onto these little social issues and they use that as like, oh, see, we're so different, guys. They hate abortion and we love it. But again, it goes back to what DB made the great point is like most of the social issues that these parties latch onto to pretend that they're different are things the government shouldn't even be involved with anyway. The government shouldn't be in the marriage business. They shouldn't be in the women's health business. I mean, these are personal choices that should be left up to people to make.
Well, let the state decide or the county even, that way if a woman's in a really conservative county and people that live there don't want things done, like an abortion clinic, so move over to the next county, make it a drive for, not across state lines. I mean, what we're doing now is just absolutely anti-freedom. And you're putting decisions in the hands of bureaucrats who are going to make a decision based on what kind of money they can make. So I guess they're looking for how they can make some kind of money in the pharmaceutical industry. That's what it's basically boiling down to.
Yeah, man. And so, this is something, and I hate to say this, but people need to remain vigilant. I don't like saying that because that seems to be one of those stupid propagandistic terms that are always used whenever there's like a terrorist attack or something. But people really do need to remain vigilant about the First Amendment and free speech because there was a lot of coverage that we did leading up to the election that was worried about Trump and his assaults on the media and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. I love it when Trump bashes CNN and NBC and all that. That's great. But it's a whole nother can of worms when you start legislating that stuff and saying, oh, we're going to legislate CNN and tell them that what they can cover and stuff like that.
And they're already dying. Like, Trump basically is ahead of the curve for his age bracket. Like, Hillary was still screwing around on MSN and buying big ad blocks. Trump was just going around having rallies, and he basically created the meme wars where he had memes going all over the place for the guy, and he didn't even have to do any marketing. And that's like the future. It's like the same reason that advertisements don't work for products anymore, because people go read about Consumer Reports review and then they buy it. They don't care about ads.
Well, Obama started in 2008. Obama started the trend of using the internet as a major fulcrum for grassroots organization, and Trump just took it to the next level. Their ground game, they had none. Their analytics, they didn't invest anything in analytics. They did everything the exact opposite way, and they absolutely slaughtered her in the strategic swing states.
And she honestly won technically with California because she had a 4.3 million vote gap there. But honestly, if we really, really get down and boiled down to every single vote and scrutinized it, how many of her votes is she going to lose on a popular vote scale? I mean, she got killed on the electoral vote, so it didn't look good either way around. The DNC just committed suicide this election cycle.
Yeah, they would have rather lost with Hillary Clinton than win with Bernie. I keep saying it, but it's the truth.
Getting a little breakage from Jake over there. I know
we're getting breakage from the DNC, dude.
Yeah, Russia just hacked into Jake's again.
Still
all right, there you go.
Better?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right. My point was simply that the DNC, they would have perfectly rather have lost with Hillary than win with Bernie. It was all there. It's a crime syndicate, and with the crime syndicate, you have your matriarchy and your patriarchy, and you live and you die by them, and that's what the DNC is a crime syndicate, same as the GOP.
That's why you really cannot drain the swamp, as it was said. There's the people on the inside are just connected either way. But what I see with his cabinet is actually one that's so damn rich that they can't really be bought. I mean, you've essentially allowed the kingpins the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, that is an interesting way of looking at it. And yeah, back to the DNC and the Red Scare and all this stuff. I mean, it kind of goes to show that they've not learned anything, because they're still going around trying to blame Russia for their loss. I mean, if the DNC wanted to remain viable, if the Democratic Party wanted to remain a major party, they would accept the loss. They would look inward and find out what went wrong. They'd find out, okay, we should never have run Hillary. We should have run someone at least similar to Bernie Sanders. Maybe not Bernie Sanders because he's just unpalatable to the establishment, but someone that at least could talk the talk. You know what I mean? Like Trump. I mean, he's talking the talk, and then look, he drained the swamp and refilled it with worse people.
And next up, believe it or not, is going to be Tulsi. She's going to defect over. She's going to become an ambassador for him. She's young. She's a female. He's going to get sick of the job, and he's just going to hand it off to her in 4 years. And she's a military darling. Believe it.
Don't tease me with the good time, man. I like Tulsi Gabbard. She's one of the Congress people I actually like.
Exactly. I mean, but that's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. I mean, there's going to be a power structure in the U.S. until everybody's got solar panels and windmills, right?
Yeah. Yep. So, this Russia thing, definitely connects to a bigger picture here with the anti-Russian propaganda. But again, the encouraging thing to me is that it seems like people are just kind of like, okay, guys, going a little too far on this Russia thing. It's not that big. I think most people that I talk to are like, okay, yeah, Russia, but I don't see it. I don't see the big deal. Like, I don't know. Is it at least partially to me? It looks like with this new polling number, 71% of people not buying the narrative. I mean, again, is it the media talking to themselves? Is it the media pushing propaganda that only they consume, and then they keep respinning it and respinning it? I mean, you turn on CNN and you're going to see this, and Washington Post and New York Times and stuff. But if 71% of people aren't buying it, then what exactly are they doing? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's very interesting. It's very confusing. Now, there's no coincidences, right? So here's the thing that's worrisome. While the corporate media is failing in its propaganda, pursuits most recently with this Russia thing, and before that, obviously with Hillary Clinton and trying to get her elected, the corporate media kind of failed. And so now they're in a position of at least perceived weakness from, their historical positioning. So now is when we're seeing all of these assaults on the First Amendment as the mainstream media loses its credibility and its, reach and its ability to create opinion. Now we're seeing an assault on free speech from the left and from the right. So, this to me is probably one of the bigger themes of 2016 and what's gone on is that there's a major struggle right now between old ways of receiving information and new ways. And since the old ways failed to innovate and capture their audience sufficiently, they're resorting back to this old way of crony capitalistic censorship, the ways that many corporations do their thing, monopolizing and regulating people out of industries and things like that, which is, big pharma 101. But now the big media companies are trying to resort to those same tactics, but it's going to be a lot more interesting to see them try to accomplish it because of the vast ecosystem of the internet. I mean, the people of the internet aren't going to sit around and just let them run, roughshod over top of us. I mean, there's going to be a major fight going on.
There's going to be a massive meme war.
Seriously, right? Jake, I wanted to get your input on this, man. Do you foresee I guess you could say the media wars are already going on, but do you foresee a major battle going on on the media front lines over, in 2017?
Well, I mean, in what way exactly? I mean, we already are seeing a kind of a massive war between mainstream media and alternative media. Do you mean in between different actual conglomerates, or?
I mean basically just between the old media establishment versus the new internet.
No, yeah,
ecosystem.
So it's already happening. I mean, this is not just it goes. There's so many division marks. There's so many different rifts. It has to do with the death of television as it gets integrated into online services and the vagaries of monetization and that key factor. I mean, a lot of the major networks haven't quite figured out how to monetize themselves on the internet yet. And so, and they haven't quite figured out how to get page views and use social media the same way that some of the younger alt media people, such as yourself, who have figured out some of the algorithms and whatnot. There's animosity there. There's career animosity where you have alt media people calling out and talking shit to the old dogs and telling them they're, the mainstream media and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of personal resentment that goes across the board. The mainstream media is taking all kinds of hell for this election. I mean, virtually anyone you ask would put them on the list of people to blame for Trump getting elected. and also to blame for putting us in the situation that we're in, which is that people don't trust the media. They assume they're getting propaganda fed to them, and it's nothing but infotainment. It's just market share, making sure they make enough money to please their shareholders. It's no different than an oil company, except the product is infotainment and propaganda instead of oil. And yes, absolutely, after time, when younger generations start realizing the bullshit and the lies that are being fed to us, there is an awakening going on, and there is a war building. And I don't think we'll see a full-fledged war in 2017, but as they start to clamp down with some of these fake news algorithms and stuff like that, absolutely. I was saying last night on our show, it's a quote by Marshall McLuhan, but he said World War III would be an information war, and there would be no differentiation between civilian and military participation. And that's exactly what's going to happen. The next major war is not going to be fought with rockets or anything like that. It'll certainly be cyber and space war, jamming satellite transmissions and shutting people's internet down. But first and foremost, it will be, and forgive the phrase, it will be a war for the hearts and minds of the new generation of thinkers who are going to decide who they trust and who they don't trust. And I think at the end of the day, any multinational conglomerate is going to be on the losing side. And they're just like, you know what they're like, Nick? The major mainstream media companies, they're like the tobacco companies. The tobacco companies, they lied and they lied and they lied for decades until finally the proof was so aware and in front of everyone that they couldn't deny it anymore. So now what are they doing now, even though it's well known that cigarettes kill people? They're basically just getting the last few people they can get addicted, the last generation that they can get addicted, so that they can reap that last bit of money off of the cigarette profits. The oil company is doing the exact same thing. Everyone knows that alternative energy is the future of energy. Fossil fuels are dying, but are they still drilling? Absolutely. They're going to reap those last few $1 trillion of oil off the planet at all costs, no matter the cost of the environment, and to the indigenous peoples and the places that live in these places that are being mined and drilled over. And the same thing is with mainstream media. You think Rachel Maddow is going to give up? No way. You think Lawrence O'Donnell is going to give up? Bill O'Reilly? You think Wolf Blitzer is just going to hang up his tie and just say no?
These fools need to be hacked too. Then
this is an ego war more than anything, and these people will never, on their dying breath, they will never admit that this was about a paycheck for them and profits for the company.
Oh man, well put. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. The funny thing that you brought up was that kind of the mainstream media lost it on both ends with the political side of things, because on one hand, I mean, how much free coverage did they give Trump? And it goes back to what you were saying, Jake, about infotainment. Like, the news industry in the United States has turned into, in a large part, infotainment stuff, right? And so it's Kim Kardashian and, what did Justin Bieber do today, and blah, 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 blah. Trump, being a guy from reality TV, I mean, he fit right in with the infotainment news industry, and he took advantage of it, manipulated it.
Oh, he was perfect. Yeah.
What was it, $2 billion in free media coverage in the primaries alone? That's not even counting the general election.
He saw a demand in the market, and he filled the demand.
Exactly. And so on the left, people are like, man, the media helped Trump get elected. On the right, because even though they gave him $2 billion in free coverage, almost all of it was like critical coverage. So on the right, it's like the media was unfair to Donald Trump. All they did was criticize him, blah, 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 blah. And so the media really lost both sides of the argument this time around, and not even counting, which I think is the biggest group that has become an anti-media group this election, which would definitely be the Bernie Sanders people, who felt majorly shortchanged. And they got, Bernie Sanders essentially got the Ron Paul treatment, which Ron Paul received in 2012, albeit Bernie Sanders had a much larger movement. but it was one of those let's ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist, and then okay, that didn't work. Now let's just undermine the candidate, and that's the treatment Bernie Sanders got by the media this time around. But being that the internet played such a major role, I mean, Sanders overcame that and still threatened to win the Democratic primary despite it being manipulated against him. And so, that really lent a lot of credence, I think, to this idea of grassroots social media, political organizing, and stuff like that. And so,
Nick, a lot of the investigations are finding that she was using, deceased voters, dude. I mean, she was using literally every dirty trick in the book just to win the primary, and she barely squeezed that out. So what did people think was going to happen?
exactly. And there's so many people from the Bernie Sanders camp that are saying, we told you guys so. Our candidate could have whooped Trump's ass, but you wanted to have Hillary, so you got.
I think the Hillary people genuinely thought they were going to be able to tap and steal the election, and I think they ran into better hackers. I always believe
you can't con a con man. What the hell is she thinking?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I said whoever wins this election will be who hires the best hackers. And I think Donald Trump is much more integrated into the business tech world than Hillary Clinton. And I think he had people there flipping votes. I mean, come on, let's get real, people. Do you really think for a split second, when we know that it's possible with magic fractions, they've shown how it's possible, do you really, really think that they're not using electronic voting fraud to try and turn some of these crucial counties? It's definitely happening. It's not even a doubt. They've shown that it's happening.
Jake, do you believe, like I do, that Trump represents the new power paradigm, which is the NSA and the military taking it back from the bankers and the private intelligence? Because check it out.
I've been wanting to talk to you about it, actually.
They have the dirt on every agent. They have every agent's name and every agent's whereabouts at all times. So who's now the real power structure? We know. We know it's the watchers now, not the spies. The watchers know everything about the spies. They right. can watch them. So this is what has happened. That's what Trump is. It's really quite that simple. And what does it represent? I have no freaking clue, but it's probably not going to be good.
So you think it's the NSA branch of the military-industrial complex over the CIA?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
And it was silent soft coup.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that because you've been floating that theory for a while, and I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it was done at the behest of the business community because they realized that the bankers were going to float World War III. Why? Because it's good for them. What is World War III bad for? People that own buildings, people that own businesses don't want that stuff annihilated in a nuclear blast. So you know what? At all costs, I think you're right, Jake. They hired better people. They had white hats in the most powerful of all, which is NSA. And they had people working for them, man. And they had a better AI that slipped in.
Absolutely, and it wasn't just on the back end. It wasn't just on the back end too, man. Look, they had Comey coming out a week before the election and completely turning. I don't know if you guys remember, this election was signed, sealed, and delivered a week before it. It was right after the grab 'em by the you know what tape. There was not a chance in hell that Trump was going to win this election. And then a week before, I remember the day, it was a Friday. They dropped it right before the election, and it completely changed everything. Comey was on the back end, they were hacking, and on the front end, they were using these planted tools of the FBI to sabotage the CIA. And yeah, I agree with you.
Interesting analysis. Now, I wouldn't go as far as saying Trump and his cohorts are in cahoots with the NSA, but I definitely agree with DB on the fact that the NSA is the new powerhouse and the CIA is the has-been. The CIA is the influencer of old. It's no longer they're no longer the people with the major, the extremely powerful tools. I mean, yeah, they still topple governments, they still start wars, they still do regime change, they still have intelligence. But the NSA is an umbrella that encapsulates all of that, and it's, we all know that cyber intelligence is the new frontier. And Jake, as you were saying, the next war is going to be fought from an informational level. The NSA is the ultimate powerhouse. I mean, unrivaled throughout the world when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, um, I agree on that. And obviously, looking at Trump's cabinet, it's stocked full of military brass.
It's all veterans.
Yeah, a bunch of generals and admirals and people like
They're
that.
all former military, and they're all too rich to buy. Like, he didn't really drain the swamp. He did something weird. He replaced it with a lagoon.
Yeah,
That maybe maybe it's not nearly as crappy as it used to be, but
there's a few
else.
gators in there. There's a couple of old ugly catfish, but at the end of the day, I mean, you can still get it's operational.
You still don't want to eat any of the three-eyed fish that you pull out of it, but maybe you can drink it in a pinch. I don't know.
Well, the idea behind lining with the brass is protecting himself against a coup. Is that the idea?
Boom.
Because he is.
I mean, how stupid would you be to go against?
He is the JFK of the right incarnate. I mean, I cannot imagine a more perfect analog to JFK on the right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't doubt it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now, I don't think there's going to be much of a fundamental change on the way things are being run. The deep state is still in place. The secret rulers that really run shit are still there. It's just a new management, really. And management may change the way it's managed, but in the end, you still got the same company. And so, we're still going to have this big empire and stuff going on. And something I mentioned at the end of last show, man, what's going on in Yemen is just, horrible, and what's going on all around the world. And Obama is skating by with this positive media coverage, coming up on the end of his, term and his legacy and all that. And it's all fluff and it's all infotainment, really. But nobody wants to talk about how brutal of a president Obama was, because everyone's still got this head buried in the sand vision of Obama as this peace-loving progressive that is going to do all these great things. And, in the end, what really did Obama accomplish outside of maybe tinkering around the edges of some social issues and stuff like that? I can't really name anything monumental as far as dismantling the empire or bringing about some type of genuine equality in the United States that he talked about, ending the wars and that kind of thing. It didn't really happen. It really didn't. But he's getting this huge pass. And again, it goes back to the failure of the mainstream media here. A very uncritical look at the end of Obama's presidency. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people around the world who are a lot worse off because Obama either failed to do anything about the Bush policies, or he simply continued them, or in some instances made them worse. So, it's important to look with an objective, eye and look at what these government people are doing, and forget the fact that you voted for him, forget the fact that it was your guy, forget the fact that you thought he was cool or anything like that. And this is something that I hope people listening tonight that did vote for Trump will keep in mind, because so far, all I've seen from people, we posted an article recently criticizing the fact that Trump put Goldman Sachs and ExxonMobil into his cabinet, and his people are already making excuses and saying, oh, well, if Trump did that, then it's probably a good thing. It's like, wait, you guys were against Hillary Clinton because she was Goldman Sachs candidate. And now Trump is filling up his cabinet with Goldman Sachs, and people are like, oh, well, it's a good thing now.
Nick, what's truly going to be telling is if he actually continues to use Kissinger. If he does, then we're pardon my French, we're screwed. But if some other guy becomes the mouthpiece, then maybe we have a chance. I just hope that guy, his reign of terror is over.
Oh my God, he is one of the worst.
Cambodia, if he ever stepped foot there, he'd be immediately executed or assassinated. People just need to read up on him.
Kissinger, man. That's one of those guys that's like 895 years old, too.
He's literally like 98, dude. I mean, how many internal organ replacements has he had already?
Well, it's easy to keep living forever when you're not human.
Oh man, him and Hillary, they're match made in somewhere, not heaven. Let's check out some of these stories on anti-media because we've got some really big stories. I mean, the week obviously started off with a huge bang with this, ambassador getting assassinated in Turkey.
Quite literally.
Terror attack over in Germany and stuff. Really, really sad what went on down in Mexico with that fireworks stand. Not really something we cover too much of because it's not really political or anything like that, but it's messed up. Mexico is one of those countries where you can go down and like buy fireworks and like go shoot them off. Like, here in San Diego where I live, that's like, one of those things that the government banned a long time ago. You don't really get to see that kind of stuff except for on Freedom Day. Firework Day on 4th of July. Sad about that. Anyway, very interesting article here on Saddam Hussein by one of our great analysts, Alice Saez. So basically, the guy from the CIA that interrogated Saddam Hussein has now come out with a book kind of recounting a bunch of the stuff that he experienced. He has like actual quotes in there from Saddam Hussein. Of course, it's, the guy's own interpretation. But the general theme of this book is really interesting because it's someone, like I said, from a former CIA person, one of the guys that actually interrogated Saddam Hussein himself. And he's basically saying, you know what, like, we fucked up. We shouldn't have done what we did in Iraq. We should have, and of course, some of this is from hindsight. The guy basically says that, we should have never been there. But he was basically saying that Saddam Hussein told me exactly how it was going to play out in Iraq, and everything he said more or less came true. He said, quote, "You're going to fail. You're going to find that it's not so easy to govern Iraq." He said, "You're going to fail because Americans do not know the language, the history. They do not understand the Arab mind." And that in order to, this is from the book. In order to maintain Iraq's multi-ethnic state, Nixon told reporters, the presence of a strong man like Saddam Hussein is necessary. So basically, it's just another insider coming out and saying, you know what, our foreign policy is messed up. We shouldn't have done what we did. And, we covered a very similar article to this one. I want to say it was late last year about Gaddafi. And, Gaddafi basically called Tony Blair and told him the same thing, too. And he said, you know what, if you guys knock me out of power in Libya, it's going to be a jihadist playground, basically. That's what he told them, and they didn't listen. And again, that's pretty similar to what Saddam Hussein said, and we didn't listen. And so with our kind of hubris foreign policy, we're going around knocking out governments because we disagree with their leaders without taking into account the extremely complex social scenarios that are underlying all of these countries and understanding why, in fact, places like Libya have a guy like Gaddafi running them, or a place like Iraq having a guy like Saddam Hussein running it. Or perfect scenario, Syria. Why is a guy like Assad in charge of Syria? And up until 2011, why was Syria, for the most part, a relatively stable country that wasn't bombing its neighbors or didn't have too much civil unrest or anything like that? These are all questions that our foreign policy ignores, whether out of ignorance, whether out of just saying whatever because we got other interests in mind, or maybe even worse, knowing that these bad things are going to happen afterwards. So this is one of our most viral articles actually in a really long time. And I recommend going and checking it out, and then maybe even picking up this guy's book. I'm not going to be a book salesman on here, but go read the article. The title is Saddam Hussein, CIA interrogator, says he tried to warn us, but we didn't listen. Go check that out because it is a really good article by one of our awesome analysts that is worth the read. But really, it's just a big time message about our foreign policy because it's just over and over and over. We find ourselves in similar situations where we take out governments, the people, there's unrest afterwards, terrorist movements spring out of the aftermath, and then we wind up getting attacked at home. And then we justify bombing more countries, and then we bomb more countries, we take out their government. The cycle continues. And only for the military-industrial complex does this business model or kind of cycle make sense. For everyone else, it sucks. It sucks for the people in Iraq that are falling now victim to unstable situation, terrorist movements forming, bunch of destroyed infrastructure, famine, and all the things that go along with the wars. Sucks for the American people because we're paying for all this stuff to happen. Not only does it suck just because it hurts, it takes away our tax money, but because we also have the guilt of knowing that we're paying for that stuff. And that for me is probably the biggest thing. It's like, okay, they're stealing my money, fine. But they're using my money, they steal it and then they use it to bomb countries and overturn governments and create, and by default create terrorist movements and stuff like that. That I can't deal with. That I don't want weighing on me at night when I'm trying to sleep. That's ridiculous. And so a lot of people pay the price. And all the soldiers that are involved that go over there and have to die, all these guys that come back with PTSD and commit suicide and get hooked on opiates and, this, that, and the other thing that winds up going on with that. I mean, all these things need to be accounted for and weighed in when we're going to make these kind of decisions. For every single war that I can think of since World War II, and I don't want to go down the World War II rabbit hole either, but everything I can think of since World War II, the cost hasn't been worth the benefit. It really hasn't.
Yeah, and the mismanagement of the system and how it's been and how people have been left behind, especially veterans, has built up this backlash. It allowed, a party that, at least had been giving lip service to being, for more people's better interests in the Democratic Party. Well, the reality of it is that they budget cut, they scrimp, they say they're going to do things, and then there's no money there, and the care gets worse for the VA, and the military gets shrunk more and more, although that's partly technology. And yeah, man, it's a backlash. Every 4 or 8 years they use it. They just play the party against each other and say it's them, it's them, it's them. But you know what? We've really only had one party the last 28 years or so. So we'll see what happens now.
blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.